Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipsson. Welcome to episode 202 of Sports Management Podcast. Today's guest is Leticia Martignon, founder of AquaNova, a bold initiative dedicated to transforming youth development in Switzerland through the sport of swimming. We spoke about building AquaNova, transforming lives through swimming, sport as a second education, why infrastructure should have a pulse, and much more. Leticia Martignon, welcome to the Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you for having me. Such an honor.
It's great to have you on the show. You are the founder of AquaNova, a bold initiative decided to transform youth development in Switzerland through the sport of swimming. So as it said there, a bold statement, really interesting company. So can you tell us a little bit about it and your role?
Okay. Well, first of all, it's not a company. We are building a foundation. So we've just created an association, which is a specific type of legal entity in Switzerland to get us started and to get the fundraising started. And then we're going to transform it into the foundation model. It's a model that we've stolen from a company. We can talk about that a little bit later, but it is an initiative or a movement, even if you want to say, to use the sport of swim, and that's just because I happen to be in it and I love it, but it could have been any other sport, and to address some of the huge societal problems that we are facing or that we will be facing in very due time. So it's about giving a space and a methodology to help kids of all sorts of backgrounds, challenges, to develop a sense of self that differs from what they're offered right now through screens, through a lot of the sort of very protective environment that, at least in Western Europe, I see being quite prevalent. Being a mom myself of 3 children, I also see what's going on in schools, what's going on in other clubs. So there was a few things that came together, I think, particularly this year or late 2024, also with geopolitical changes, an orientation towards defense rather than society. There's so much to talk about, but essentially it showed me that there is a real true hole in what we offer kids today. And when I say what we offer kids, it's really, I think, something natural that we've always done. We've always ran around. We've always, climbed stuff and jumped into pools and so on. And nowadays, I think that movement is becoming more of a luxury, really, in the lives of children in developed countries. And I think we have a role to play as sports managers to change that. And that was my big wish, something I feel very passionate about, because I was kind of thrown into it. I saw children transform in the water, in the lanes, when I was volunteering as a committee member in a swim club here that my children swim in. And I ended up seeing kids transform in the water. And when I saw that, and when I saw how difficult it is for coaches to do that because they don't have time. I had the luxury of time. I was just, coaching here and there when someone was missing and so I had the time to reach out to parents and saw that with a little bit more, time and effort, we were able to give a chance to kids that were very shy, did not have self-confidence, to turn into little kids that were really proud of themselves. And I think, we now have the luxury of having everything. Really, if you look at it, at least in Western Europe, we're very, very lucky. But we still have confidence problems. We still have, issues at school. And I believe sports is one of the last pieces that we have left to give, to really prepare kids for a world where they will need resilience and character and strength and self-confidence.
I completely agree. And I know you have described sport as a second education, and this is really what you're talking about here, right? To grow the confidence or some other aspects that they might be lacking.
Absolutely. I think we're part of a transformation, a societal transformation in, how parents are expected to raise their kids, how teachers are expected to teach kids, and I see there's a lot of issues. I just heard a interview the other day in a German television where there was a primary school teacher who actually, I can't remember what the initiative was, but she took the initiative to raise the arm and say, hey, we have a huge problem. We cannot catch up to kids. We've got 20 kids that all have concentration issues of some sort on varying degrees. They come from varying cultures, which is a great thing, but which also presents challenges that teachers are not equipped with. They do not have a second hand. They do not have the time to debrief. They do not have the time to explain things and then also make sure they're implemented. And kids are at the receiving end of that, So I think that the issue of learning how to overcome challenges, learning what it means to invest time and to reap the benefits after a while and not instantly is something that is becoming very rare in life. We used to have, I remember that it was, it was a privilege to get a certain amount of things. And clearly this has also to do with buying power, but not only. I also think that, where parents were a lot more oriented on making stuff work in their lives and, and following a certain road that they had laid out for them. Now everything is so open, everything is so possible that often kids are left with, it's all there, really. And that's going to be an issue when they're trying to manage rejection in a job market that is increasingly international, a rejection, even in their social lives, or rejection in their in partnership. Nowadays, an app can give you 50,000 people that are around you, take that. There's a lot of realities that have changed. And I do think that sport has the unique place to show us that not only we are part of a group and we can actually work in that group and with the group, but we're also capable of overcoming difficulties. Physical difficulties, that's another thing. Kids nowadays don't know how to do the Putzelbaum. I don't know how you call it in English, but to just, roll over on a mattress, they're having tough times on bikes. They're having tough times running. There's a lot of things that are changing physically. So, which have impact, right? Health impacts. And again, coming back to the societal issue, who's going to pay for that impact? Who's going to pay for the lack of coordination? Who's going to pay for overweight? All of these things are pretty big. So it always comes back to me, it always comes back to that one thing. Why not use sports as a tool to address those and give a chance to those kids that might have a difficulty, finding it?
Yeah, fantastic. And that is an issue, what you said, that kids are less athletic, so to speak. And, it's more with screen addiction, and you're having iPads from an early age, and maybe more people, they hang out nowadays on the computer or through something else. So not getting that natural exercise as you might have gone in the past. So how do you see AquaNova changing this?
Well, first of all, we want to make sure that we create an environment that is inclusive and that actually goes beyond just the swim school. We've got plenty of swim schools here. Almost everybody, but most kids, if they want to, they can learn how to swim. What we want to create is a place where there's a possibility for those kids that would otherwise be stuck in just, okay, I learned how to swim and now that's it. To stick around. What I've observed is that a lot of parents are worried about activities like sports, which, if you like them, you probably will end up practicing them more than twice a week at some point, having an impact on their academic performance. And as we see a rise in neurodiversity, we see a rise in ADHD and dyslexia diagnoses, I believe we need to also create a place where we can reassure the parents and say, hey, your kid can be with us, do their sports, and there will be someone around who can also help them with their homework, or help them explain a concept in maths or in language, whatever that may be. So long term, we would like to. When I say I want to create an academy, it's really in the large sense. It's almost going back to Greek you were saying you're married to a Greek woman, going back to Greek traditions where education was complete, right? It wasn't just one thing or the other. It was both. It was, physical and musical in the sense of the muses and analytical. So I would like to create a place where I can reassure parents, also from a financial perspective, that they can confidently send their kid to us. We will encourage training more than twice a week, even from a very young age, because I believe that as you do things and as you become better because you learn quickly and you apply and you get to practice, you develop passion. For me, passion is not something that rains down on you and you start something. I believe you develop it as you do things, as you become better at it, and you get that pleasure out of the mastery. Even when you're very small, advancing fast is what makes you love it. And so we want to encourage kids to fall in love with swimming because it happens to be swimming. But again, it could be volleyball. It could be anything else. So we want to create a holistic approach, but we also want to make sure the first problem is solved, which is infrastructure. We've got a lot of issues in Switzerland and in Europe in general. I hear this all over the place because I work for a German swim school group. Same thing. Swim schools are facing a very old infrastructures that are falling apart, need to be closed. And what do you do with 400 kids or 1,000 kids when you got to close the swimming pool for a year or two? And then everybody fights about lane availability. I myself had the issue that I have a group of competitive swimmers when I was in the committee. I had to find, for 4 weeks, I had to find a place to train, and nobody was giving me a single lane for an hour and a half. For a group of 10 kids that all they wanted to do is not sit at home, not sit in front of their screens, and get their bodies in movement, right? Just before a big competition that we had coming up. And the frustration led me to think, hey, I can't develop anything if I don't have the space for it, if I don't have the resources. So, I looked around. Obviously, there were no free lanes. There was nothing. And it made me think, what is the alternative? And I had a lot of conversations with local politicians and local, public infrastructure teams, and they all said the same thing. For us to change this, it'll take us years and years, if not decades, and dozens of millions of Swiss. And the same is true in any other country. And so I felt we need to break the system. It cannot go on like that. We cannot have, families wait for decades to get a pool, which will be out of date by the time it's built, right? Especially now that, there's a lot of development in terms of technology, in terms of environmentally friendly machinery, etc. So I got inspired by the local commercial, like a shopping mall. They were all of a sudden like offering these really cheap office spaces, and I was looking for an office space. I said, how come you're offering this at these prices? They said, listen, it's within a very restricted time. You're going to have to get out by, and I can't remember the date, and because we're going to renovate, and everything was empty. Everybody had left, put up shop somewhere else, and they were just trying to bridge that gap. And I said, a few months is probably not reasonable, but what if there are empty spaces out there? And I see more and more empty spaces as there is a crisis. There's a real estate crisis because a lot of offices don't need as much office space anymore because of remote work. There's also, there's a transition also in terms of technology. There's more robotics. There's more AI. We need less and less space to do more and more things. And so these industrial spaces often are amazing. There's, high ceilings, loads of space. And I said, how about using these spaces and creating something that, okay, it won't look like your average pool with like 100,000 showers and all this space and, 50,000 small pools around it. What if you had just a very simple 3-lane pool that fits into, an average space industrial type of quality, and fill those spaces and give them another purpose? because they're standing around. So I started talking to constructors and to also the people that I know that have built pools before. And they all said, hey, this is amazing, but you need to do it privately. You can't wait for state funding and state organization and state planning to do it, because then you end up doing the same thing as everybody else is doing, which is not what you're looking for. And that's when I started talking around me, talking to potential donors, and to clients and to architects, and everybody's very excited about it. Because indeed, it does, like tiny houses where the concept totally shifts. It could turn into something where we are much faster and much cheaper. And my goal is to build a pool, to create a system that can build a pool in less than a year for less than $1 million.
That's fantastic. Bold statements, and that is one. And also you had the pocket lanes concept. And so can you talk a little bit about that? And also, like you've mentioned, that the infrastructure should have pulse. So what do you mean with that?
Yes, that englobes a lot of different things, but the pocket lanes idea actually came from my dad when I shared my project with him. He's a Grammy-nominated pianist, and he's very creative. And his head is like there's so many ideas in it. And he read it, and he's like, "Oh, it's like pocket stuff. It's like you could put it in a pocket and go somewhere else and put it up there." And I said, "That's exactly it. We're trying to stay small. We don't want to scare neighborhoods and the responsible people with these like huge, we're going to come in there and we're going to block your roads for 50 years. And so it has to be small. It has to be easily buildable. It has to be modular to a certain degree. So what inspired me as well is the pools that they put up for Paris 2024. That was a pool in the middle of Paris, and it was built in 2 weeks, and it was taken off in 2 weeks, and it had its life there for whatever weeks. And I said, well, if we can do that with like a really, really competitive, like really good pool, we should be able to do something that can live in a space for 3 to 5 years. And when that space needs to be changed, use it somewhere else where someone else might need it, or simply replicate it in a place where there's no pool and where there's no access to water, which is the case in a lot of places in Western Europe. And so the idea that it has to be quite compact is part of the whole concept. And we even are building, the plan is to build a box around it, if you will, a very nice looking box, but still a box, which means that you don't have to transform the entire space. You just use it as a shell, and you put that box with the pool in it. So it becomes like a tiny house, something that you could even potentially, move around from one place to the other. Obviously, with an infrastructure like a pool, that's not exactly the same job. You can't just pack it up in a caravan and move it somewhere else. But still, we don't have to think of these things as these huge centers that exist around at hectares and hectares of space. So pocket lanes represents that. That's the concept is that. And why does it have a pulse? It first of all, the fact that we can build it quickly and potentially move it and rebuild it somewhere else means that there's movement in it. It's agile. So it's as everything today, happens much faster. Technology allows us also to build these more complex things in a much faster way. In fact, for the box, some of the parts are already pre-designed. They're not pre-built. We're not there yet, but they're pre-designed. And so, design time comes down. It's just adjustments. It's rethinking certain elements, but it's not reinventing the wheel completely. So we want to be at the pulse of the particular community that we are going to go in, hearing, we have a need, and being able to almost at the rate of a heartbeat, respond with something and give them a solution. I can think of basketball courts popping up left and right. I don't know which decade it was, in the last century, but that transformed communities. So in that sense, we're thinking about that as well, being at the pulse of time as well, because I do believe that repurposing things, it's like recycling. It's part of what we need to start doing if we want to save our planet, if we want to save also, or if we want to address some of the issues that we're having in our environment or in our society, we have to be quicker, we have to be more agile, we have to be, there where we are needed, and not in our heads thinking, oh, let me find 500 million to build 2 centers in 20. That is great. And I don't want to poop on that. That's absolutely important that we have the state also looking at this and creating these bigger places where you can hold competitions, where you can have, families hanging out all day. We will not be able to offer that. But we need to have a private alternative that just plugs the holes of where the state cannot follow.
Yeah, and I love that. And you mentioned that when like working with state, municipalities, governments, maybe they are not the most agile sometimes. So how do you feel like this is? Have you got any feedback? Like, do they think that this is a great addition to what they are doing with the big facilities, or are they something that like? Have you felt any pushback, or how has the feedback been so far?
So far, it's been amazing. I've both spoken to the local mayor and also the person responsible for swimming infrastructure in this community, and they both absolutely love it. For 2 reasons. First of all, there is a general sense that we need to start creating more bridges between the private and the public sector. A lot of politicians are understanding that, first of all, they're much too slow to respond to some of the pressing issues, and that we cannot start taxing even more, because there are more and more problems. We have to think creatively. We have to think differently. So they have absolutely loved it, and they have encouraged me to continue to grow the private aspect of it, which does not mean that they're excluded from the conversation. On the contrary, they have offered to help with finding locations. And obviously, from our side, what we can offer is on the downtime when we are not training, when we are not having the private, let's say, the families come in. We are happy to offer opportunities to schools whenever they don't find a place to go. So there is a natural conversation that happens, or that should, in my opinion, happen, because it's in our interest altogether to collaborate and to talk to each other. I know for a fact that a lot of schools don't have enough lane space in order to get their kids to swim, which is why my son's best friend at 12 years old barely, he did like the doggy thing, so he wouldn't go down, but he wouldn't really swim either. And he now, in a matter of a year, he now swims 25 meters butterfly, just because, we all work together to make it happen. But it was such an effort and it cost so much money on one person that I felt we have to have a different option, and more pools that have less, let's say, fancy outfitting are absolutely necessary. And again, I mentioned this before, but I believe that this is just one model for one sport, but we could probably multiply this and apply it on other sports as well.
Fantastic. And I was going to ask that with the story with your son's friend there. So glad you mentioned that as well, because it's a really great example of, what a huge change that you can do for one person through, in your case, the world of swimming.
Absolutely. He changed physically. I mean, he used to walk with sort of his head down, shoulders, quite a tall boy, and physically powerful. So we saw that there was something there, and quite shy, and obviously his character didn't change completely, his personality didn't change completely, but he opened up, and you could say the way he walks around the pool today is a totally different story. And he's so proud of himself, and he had said, I want this. And he went to train by himself if he had to. He would, he had the support of a godmother who was, financially putting up the money for it. And together they made something incredibly happen. First of all, by making it possible, and then our coaches, by taking him on and saying, okay, if this is the project, let's give it a try. Let's try our best. And he just did it. Within less than 1 year, he joined the competitive team, which was his objective. And it is one of the most amazing success stories I've seen in the sport.
Because you're a mother of 3, that they are all swimming, you come from swimming, so you really have like your heart into this. How much, it must feel good to do something that you're really passionate about and that you can see a change also through your children.
Absolutely. Well, and I would say my children probably were to quite a large extent responsible for it, because I wouldn't have gotten involved in the local club if it hadn't been for my children. I saw that my eldest, my son, my girls were almost on the way out. I didn't expect them to continue, but then they ended up joining anyway. But my son was starting to show some ability, and he felt really strongly about wanting to develop. And he had been also coached by a couple of people that had said, "Hey, there is something there." Nothing. Oh, he's the next Olympic champion, but they were understanding that there was capacities there that should be developed. And so I, as a child, I've been in many sports actually. I played basketball in high school and in college. I rode horses until my 15th year of life. I did fencing in my 20s, and all of it at a competitive level, because I always wanted to know how I was progressing. For me, I just needed to know, okay, did I or did I not progress? And so it was very important for me to have that feedback. And when I saw, however, I always had to do it myself. My mom was a single mom as well. She was raising me alone, literally, because my dad was very far away, living on a different continent. And so she didn't have the time to, drive me left and right and do this and that and whatever. And so whenever there was an issue that I couldn't solve, I just had to stop or change places and I ended up getting to a level that was satisfactory to some degree, but never to a level where I actually felt mastery. And I did want to offer my kids the possibility of feeling that, not necessarily going to any particular level. Here at home, there's no result that is a obligation. But what we are doing is, once we've committed to something, we're gonna do that. And while they are committing to training 5 to 6 times, I wanted to commit to making sure that when they do train, they have the best possible options at their fingertips. And we only have one pool. It's a 25-meter pool. All the other clubs have at least 3 pools. They have a 50 pool in there somewhere. So their kids are getting a lot more resources to develop, and we needed to really do something else in order for my kids to get that same option. I could have sent them to the other club, but I felt that wasn't the right answer because, first of all, I couldn't I couldn't drive them around, and some of the other clubs were too far away. But also, I kind of felt like I didn't agree with some of the methods or with what I heard was being done and the size and so on. So I said, why don't I apply whatever, I've learned through basketball, through living in the US where sports is huge, through having committed my, a good portion of my childhood and my youth to a sport. Why don't I apply all of that and help the club develop the swim section, which I did, hiring 2 new coaches, and bringing in a consultant from Italy. Italy is a big swim nation, who had already brought people to the Junior World Championships, to the University Games, European Championships, and so on, and who I had gotten in contact with. And combining these 2 things made us grow in a way that wasn't possible before. And so now my son has reached the level that he can reach at his age. I think he's got the 5th time in Switzerland in his discipline. But it's quite hard if you take into account everything that's around and all the limitations that are around. And but I love challenges, and the bigger the challenge, the more I get excited, the more I find ways and so on. So having gone through that with all the hurdles that were in my way, it really confirmed, first of all, that I had something to do in sports, that I was still as passionate about sports as I was as a child and as a young woman, and that I had a true opportunity to use everything that I had done, digitalization, changing processes, changing the way that we were communicating with parents and so on. All of that work, I wanted to make it worth something, and I wanted to, but I felt there was a limit there. There was a limit because there's other interests and so on and so forth, and totally legitimate. But as my vision grew and as my ideas grew, I realized, okay, this is getting tight. I need to find a different outlet. But yeah, it was a definite confirmation that when you are working for something that you're passionate about, nothing is too big and nothing is too hard, and you can really, really make a difference. And we need more, I think, initiatives like that are passion led, because they are, they are going to disrupt, whether it's technology or anything really that we're struggling with.
And I like you say that you like a challenge, and you have set a goal that you want to produce an Olympian or Paralympian within 10 years. That's a big goal. And how do you look at that, and how would success look like to you beyond medals?
Well, success beyond medals, I think, comes back to what we initially talked about, which is that we are able to transform lives through the sport. And I think I can already give an example. We're going to start training with a young girl who has dyscalculia, or I don't know how you say it in English, but she has a lot of trouble with maths. And she would have to stop swimming because she's not able to catch up at school. And so we're going to start training with her at different times that would allow her to have more time for studying. And we will train her. We will train her in public pools. And to do that, we're going to use technology. So I know that a lot of people in sports are going to say, "Oh, but you can't use technology to change everything. It's not going to work. And if there's no talent and blah, 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 blah." Yes, there's a lot of arguments that without the work, you're not going to get the result. For sure, 100%. But I believe that we can raise the percentage of people that discover a capacity in themselves, maybe not Olympic, but maybe that's their thing. Maybe the technology which will help us see things that you can't see with the eye, feel things that you can't feel with your hands or with your body. And I am so convinced that a lot of kids stop their swimming career. In fact, I know it for a fact, because either they think they suck. My son thought he sucked, and he's now number 5 in his age group in Switzerland. So there's no way that he sucks. He might not be an Olympian, but he doesn't suck. And stop like this, or they stop because of the pressure, or they stop because the coach says, "Nah, you're not really producing any results. I'm going to focus my attention to someone else." So we are going to make sure that doesn't happen. And we are going to try and find the talent where other people don't have the time or the resources to discover it. So my biggest goal is to know that, if in each location I found 10 kids that were actually caught, that we caught in the web, and that we developed, and that have learned something about themselves that they would otherwise not have learned. Maybe they even have a career now that is based on that, thanks to the work they did. If we're able to produce that, we have won 100%. The para or Olympian or Paralympian that we want to produce is going to be produced with, again, less resources than a lot of other institutes or clubs. And with a lot more innovation. So again, one marker, one KPI for me is going to be how much did we disrupt the way that, athletes are handled, trained, accompanied, supported, to create that level of excellence and performance where it should not have been possible. And last year, I read a blog post of a Canadian a professional in swimming. He was from this, shoot me dead. I can't remember the name. I should have written it down, but some place lost in Canada, and Canada's big, right? And there was this, I think they had 3,000 inhabitants, and they produced something like 18 Olympic swimmers. And Toronto at the same time had produced like 6, I don't know, something like that. It was mind-boggling. It's like, how did that happen? And they didn't even have a 25-meter or 25-yard pool. They had a 20-yard pool. And some swimmers, just their underwater when they start, they get up at 15 yards. So what do you have? 5 meters swimming, and then you have to change again, and then you have to, turn and do the whole thing again. Anyways, incredible. And this was decades ago. And so I thought, everybody's complaining about not having access to a 50-meter pool. Everybody's complaining about not having enough lanes and stuff like that. And yes, the more resources you have, the better your conditions are. But it doesn't mean that you cannot produce quality work if you are challenged like that. So it's going to be a win for me to even if we just manage to insert ourselves in some level of international presence, having a completely different system and methodology, which includes also physiology, because we're going to work a lot on physiology as well. If we can insert ourselves in that environment, that's already a huge win. And to be honest, I'm fairly sure that we're probably going to produce a Paralympian before we produce an Olympian, because there's just not enough offer. There's not enough attention to that. There's so many people that have massive talent, but a lot of clubs don't have the lane space, the time, or the interest to say, hey, I'm going to invest in you, and I'm going to make sure that you are part of a team, that you are part of this, that you can train, 5 times a week, 6 times a week. So there's a true lack of offers there. And I think that we can, with that in mind, using technology, using, a holistic approach, mental, academic, et cetera, you can really make a difference. It's not hard. And I'm probably going to, hear a lot of people say, we should actually do that. And I encourage you, yes, you should.
Yeah, definitely. And, I hope that this message spreads as well, because it's really great things that you're doing, and really look forward to following it. But, looking back a little bit on what you have done so far, has there been any bumps on the road in your career? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Well, I mean, bumps in the road of my career. I came from communication and brand strategy, so that was the biggest part of my career, and I applied that in technology, in finance, in luxury. I think the biggest bumps in my career were always the ones where I felt all of a sudden I did not really contribute to something. I mean, yes, I contributed to that particular company's financial success, reputation, etc. But I didn't feel like I was actually making an impact on a bigger picture. I did start to feel that when I worked in blockchain, because blockchain is a technology which, aside from all the hype, aside from cryptocurrencies, aside from meme coins and all of this stuff, can transform a lot of issues that we are facing in society as well. So I was getting very excited about that, but it's a very hard place to make it. And I do not have any coding background. So I also faced, a lot of technical obstacles. And I think there was also a point in my life, to be very honest, where the grind, there's we always have to get through a certain amount of time where there's a grind, where you have to prove yourself, show that you can do something, and I felt, if I'm going to do that, because I did want to change from the purely brand strategy and commercial strategy towards something more meaningful, I felt, okay, this is going to be a grind. Like, there's going to be a part of that which is going to be really hard. So it might as well be in something that you feel really passionate about, and that you can have an instant effect also on you. I mean, let's be honest, we're also doing this to feel good about ourselves and to have fun. And I think that I was a little bit of a how could you say that? A tough spot where certain decisions had to be taken. And I am a mom of 3. I don't have the same time as a 24-year-old, or even a 30-year-old without kids. And I had to make some decisions, and I think I was afraid of some of them. And I was afraid of pushing for something that was going to, and I'm sure of this, be uncomfortable for quite a lot of people. So when I started to develop this vision, I I had a couple of conversations, even internally in the club that I was working at. And some of the things were just Chinese. We're like, what the hell are you talking about? And but I did have an interesting. First of all, I had someone who helped me out, which, by the way, is all your fault, because I was I was listening to your podcast and I heard Brett Smith, who's a former boxing champion and turned into a business coach. And I realized that I was holding back, holding back, holding back. I was trying to be the nice girl. I was trying to be I would say, I think it was more about an identity, like who did I want it to be, and having a little bit of a fear of saying, hey, you've tried a few things to have an impact. You've tried a few things, and it was hard, either because of the family situation or maybe because you didn't expect that piece of the world to be so complex. Are you going to do this again, and are you going to do it in sports? And sports is tough. I mean, this. Um, and I think I was on the edge, and then I heard that podcast, and I heard him talk about what he went through, and the challenges, and also the fact that he has ADHD, which is something that we share, and I was like, wow, I'm listening to someone I think who can have an impact in my life. So I reached out to him. Said, hey, I saw you on this podcast. And so he gracefully accepted to work with me, even though I'm a woman, and he's actually a coach for men, which was exactly what I was looking for. And I felt like I needed someone. My idea about boxing was like, you get hit and then no, get up again, So I was imagining myself, getting coached, which was totally different. That's not at all the way that Brett works. But it did help. And it made me say, okay, I need to give this a try. And of course, this is several months of work and of reaching out to the Swiss Federation, of coming to terms as well with my role in the club that I was in, in towards my children, so many factors. So it took a bit of time also to sort of get sorted in my head. But I think that it's part of the biggest obstacle I think that I've faced, and it has happened in the past few years, was really the fact that you come at a certain point in life where it's got to do with identity. It's got no longer to do with money. Even though I have to say that even that, as a woman, 45 years old, and I see this around with quite a few of my friends, we're having a harder time finding a place where we feel like we're contributing, and where we also are fitting into the team, fitting into the vision. A lot of people told us, and again, I repeat, this is not just me talking, this is quite a few people talking, you're overqualified. And we say, yes, but we want to get into a new area, so let us work, and feeling like it's a true test. It's a true test of where you want to go. And when I decided I want to go into sports, I also looked for a job in sports specifically, which was very tough to get. I now have a wonderful part-time job with a wonderful woman in Germany that is building a group of swim schools, and who is really, an example of how to just get shit done, just get it done and do it. And that only happened when I was really clear with myself what I wanted to do and the things that I did no longer want to do. And then all of a sudden it made sense. And what I was saying to her made sense to her, felt authentic, felt real. And that's when it clicked. And it didn't click with a lot of the other things that I tried to obtain to, have that bill paid or whatnot. So the biggest obstacle I think that I had, that I can think of right now, is to align yourself with your identity, align yourself with your passions, align yourself also with everything that you're not good at, is to know what you're not good at, is to know what you're not going to be successful for, and then just go for it.
No, I love that. And also it kind of answers the next question a little bit, but for advice for some young people who, if they want to break into the sports industry, what would be some advice that you had for them? You mentioned some here, but maybe emphasize on them, or if you have some others.
I think one of the biggest surprises that I always loved sports. I loved doing it. I loved coaching, a little bit here and there. all of it. But what really I didn't expect was the level of impact the kids were having on me, not the other way around, right? Um, to be able to transmit something, to be able to see them transform, to be able to see them overcome something, and the way their faces change, to know that you're part of a group of people that are really important in their lives, and you're there and you're accompanying them. Um, I think that is something that is often overlooked. I'm not saying everybody. Some people come into sports by that route, right? They're thinking, I want to, I want to be with kids. I want to help develop them. I love sports. Why don't I combine the two things? But then I think the big attraction of sports is obviously the really starry thing, the Olympics, the performance, the great stories that you can hear, the technology, very sexy, it's very hip, the merchandising, the brands, all of that is very attractive. And I think everybody thinks sports is fun, and we're all here to do something joyful together and so on. But sports can also be really, really hard. And especially if you are in the action of sports, if you're not in everything that's around it, like the tech, like the brands and so on, if you're part of the people that are on the ground, do not underestimate what it means to be working with someone else's kids. I'm a mom. And I know I do look at the coaches, and I do know, what did you say? Say that again? And I have to hold myself back, because I was with my kids as they were training at the border of the pool, at the pool itself. So it was a very tough negotiation. And imagine you're talking to someone else's kids, and you're going to have to deal with those parents. So I think that there is everybody should try it out, and they should try it out on the ground. And anything that I can now do right now, I'm implementing a tool for the German swim schools, a digital tool to manage it, and to manage parent communication, to manage sales, to manage a whole bunch of things. Even as I'm doing that, what has truly been helpful is the conversations I had with the parents and with the kids, but especially with the parents, the ones that pay the bills, the ones that, get the whole thing going. So it is incredibly important to be part of what's going on the ground. You can do that as a volunteer. You can also get jobs like this, for sure. Not everybody's going to become an Olympic coach. There's a million jobs out there, though. And it's super important to actually have lived through it, to actually have understood the reality on the ground. I think that would be my biggest recommendation, because that will help you in any sport. Like, you can jump from sport to sport. If you have had that experience, you will be able to apply a lot of it somewhere else. And my career in sports started as a 16-year-old. I was the what they called in the US, they called the manager, the girl that runs around with the water bottles. And I did that for the soccer team of my high school in the US, in New York. I learned so much about soccer. I can still talk strategy, and I'm not even a soccer fan. So even that, just being around, listening to, and experiencing what goes on in sports is the most important piece of work tools that you're going to need in the future.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. Almost approaching time here. You have listened to the to the podcast before, so what's coming up? I love to end on a networking question. So who from your network do you think would be a good guest on this podcast?
So I'm going to mention three people. First of all, I will mention Jean-Laurent Bourquin. He is a Swiss former lawyer who is now involved in helping federations get approved for the Olympics. And he was the one who got, I think it was breakdancing. I think he got breakdancing approved.
That spread. After that came in, that was a big talk about the breakdancing.
Oh, yes. That was huge. That was huge. And I think if he will, I don't know if he will do it publicly, but the story behind it is amazing.
Yeah, I would love that story, because also because of how it played out.
Absolutely. And and he's been at the IOC, he's had his whole career in sports, and he also has a beautiful things to say about, what brought him to do this, and what all of his parkour, the whole story was. get where he is now. So he's amazing, and he's incredibly generous with the things that he shares. So I would definitely recommend him. Second, I would mention my current boss. So the woman Maike Wellmann, who is developing the group of swim schools in Germany. She is a force to be reckoned with, and she would be such an inspiration to young women getting started in sports. And she's got loads of stories to tell as well. So another swimmer in there. And yet another swimmer, David Karasek, who I've reached out to actually to interview him, because he's a former Olympic swimmer who is now turned into a mental coach. And I really love the stories that he tells about mental training, even for kids. And he comes back to what we're facing in terms of development, in terms of character, et cetera, and in terms of how to keep kids in sports when often the mental part is what breaks them and what makes them stop. So he, I think, could also bring a lot of interesting stories.
Fantastic. 3 great guests. So you said you wanted to interview him as well. Is it for like a project or for your own learning, or are you also starting some type of media outlet?
I'm starting a little bit, but it's more from a swimmer parent's perspective. So I want to help swim parents to understand, there's so many parts in a swimmer's career where things can break. And any athletes, but swimming is something that you have to do a lot in order to get very far. So it requires a lot of sacrifices. It requires a lot of the whole group. You can't do it. A kid can't do it by himself. They need the mom and dad and everybody to be there, the coach. And so him particularly, I would be interviewing about what do parents need to know about, the mental aspect to help their kids, but also to not be scared themselves, to say, oh my God, he's suffering from the pressure. Yes, he is. But maybe all he does is needs as a tool to, take that pressure off. So that's what we're going to be talking about specifically. But yes, the idea is to create a set of tools for parents that want to accompany their kids to make swimming part of their lives.
Amazing. Leticia, thank you so much for taking the time to be on Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great time. And yes, I'll be looking forward to not to listening to myself. That's going to be very hard, but to be listening to everybody that's coming up next. I've already gone through most of your podcasts.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the follow or subscribe button on your podcast app so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com, connect with me on LinkedIn, or follow the podcast on Instagram, X, and Facebook @SportsMPodcast.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.